Why don't we get started? And more people will come in as we get through our first few slides, and I think that'll be fine. So good morning or afternoon, everyone. I'm Marcia Nedland. I'm one of the organizers for the National Middle Neighborhoods Community of Practice. Anne, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone. So I'm Ann DePetta, also a consultant, and I've worked with Marcia for a really long time, many, many years, and
Mhm.
also been on the support team here for the Middle Neighborhoods Initiative, I guess, gosh, 7 years or something like that. It's been
Something
a bunch
like
of
that.
years,
Yeah.
something like that.
And Anne is always behind the scenes. Anytime you see me, she's producing webinars, helping me interview people in this case for the topic of this webinar and so forth. She also writes all of the case studies that you get to read about. So she does a lot, and she does it usually behind the scenes. So let's get started with what we're talking about today. Oh, I didn't actually say our title though, did I? So we're going to talk about the lessons we learned from doing interviews with 9 cities that have stronger than the norm local middle neighborhoods networks. We'll talk about what we mean by a local middle neighborhood network and what those strengths were and what were some other themes or characteristics that carried through the interviews that we did. The reason that we did these interviews was that we wanted to learn what those common characteristics or situations were so we could see if they could be replicable in other places so that people who are on more the beginning journey of creating a local middle neighborhoods network might learn from some of the successes that they had and be able to adopt some of those practices. So that's what this is all about, is sharing with you what happened. And we'll have a lot of time for you to we have some prompts for you to give some thought to how these things apply to you. So if somehow you haven't been to one of our webinars before, just to let you know who we are, the National Middle Neighborhoods Initiative is sponsored by NCST and NeighborWorks America. Uh, we have a community of practice, which is the entity that Ann and I provide support to. And it offers these webinars and does a variety of other things to connect practitioners, policy makers, and researchers. Um, NCST handles the research end of this, so they help support various efforts and research around middle neighborhoods, and they also do some of it themselves. They handle policy analysis and advocacy around housing, lending, and community development in general. And then we both do communication strategies, advancing awareness about what middle neighborhoods are, why we should pay attention to them, how people are working to support them, and so forth. We do have a steering committee of 20 researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. NCST really handles and supports the steering committee, and I think we have a couple of those members on the call today. So, what's a middle neighborhood? Um, we don't have hard and fast rules about what is or is not a middle neighborhood, but we do have common characteristics. They tend to be, although are not exclusively, built mostly with single family homes because their target market was families with children when they were built. They tend to be still well more than 50% owner occupied, but we often see that eroding. In fact, probably when they were built, they were more like 80 to 90% owner occupied. The housing stock is aging and in ways that are a problem, although they're generally acceptable in their condition. Certainly, they usually meet code. Um, the issue usually has to do with the features and updates that would allow them to compete well in today's home buyer market. And one of the things that I think is a reason to invest in them and keep them a part of our American dream is that they are more racially, ethnically, and economically diverse. They are those neighborhoods of mixed incomes where there are a variety of different housing options, where there can be resilience and opportunities to move up. There's just, such an interesting view when you look at their makeup compared to their lower income or higher income counterparts. So today it's me and it's Anne, and we may have other people that we interviewed piping up to add more color to what we're laying out if they're in the audience. And what we're going to do is just talk through, I think it's 8 themes with possible action items that you could take to replicate or for these same items or something similar in your community, and we'll have time for discussion all throughout and at the end. Okay, so it seems like we should say talk about what is a local middle neighborhoods network. And it's not easy to say LMNN, although that tends to be the acronym that we use for this idea. And what we mean by that is it's just whatever your local network is of leaders who share, communicate, advocate around middle neighborhoods in the city. So you're looking to see that perhaps there are expanded income limits on a program so that it goes to 110 or 120% of area median, or you're looking for some funding that is non-federal funding that would actually help do some creative things that would help stabilize your housing stock and make it more competitive. Things like that. So whatever your issues are, um, that you have people who know what middle neighborhoods are and whatever they call them, and who get together to try and do something about them. These leaders, in what we've seen in these 9 cities, certainly they include nonprofits, but they also include residents, local and state government in some cases, philanthropy, of course, other institutions like universities, major employers, developers, real estate professionals, all kinds of different entities who have a stake in middle neighborhoods. And it's really interesting to see in some places how far they've taken that outside what we might think is the normal set of partners around traditional housing programs. So why do we interview them? I think I sort of said that at the beginning. We've noticed that some cities have stronger networks, and by that we mean they're more diverse, more cross-sector, perhaps more organized, or they meet on a regular basis. They tend to have a greater sense of urgency about correcting the trajectory of the middle neighborhoods. We also noticed that those places tended to be better resourced to assist middle neighborhoods with policy, practice, and funding. Now, it could be, we don't know which direction the cause and effect go, but certainly those 2 things seem to be happening, and it made us want to learn more about what was going on there and how things worked at the local level. These are the cities we interviewed: Baltimore, Chicago, Cleveland, Chattanooga, Danville, Virginia, Des Moines, Plano and Suburban Dallas, and Syracuse, New York. So our goals for today are simply to share these themes and ideas and some possible action items we came up with, and provide a forum for you to really think about those and reflect on what are some actual next steps you could take around any or all of these themes to start, deepening, broadening your local middle neighborhood network. So let's do our first theme, and then we'll have you answer a question in the chat. We observed when we were interviewing these cities that local middle neighborhood networks have a variety of identifiers for middle neighborhoods, what we would call middle neighborhoods, and it all works and it's all fine. Some places actually do call them middle neighborhoods, like Cleveland, and Philadelphia. Um, Middle class and near middle class neighborhoods are sort of the nomenclature that Detroit uses. There are a lot of local initiative names like special investment districts in Des Moines. Some people just sort of are still in the middle housing. They're thinking more about the housing, although they acknowledge that the location of that housing is in neighborhoods, but that connection isn't quite as strong to a place-based approach. And then we also notice that missing middle is a common conflation. People don't always know that that's not the same thing as middle neighborhoods. So missing middle housing is about a housing type that could be located anywhere. Um, Middle neighborhoods are really more about a place-based approach to conserving not just the housing stock, but all of the amenities and qualities that make them great places to live. So we'd love to hear from you in the chat. What do people call the neighborhoods that we would think of as middle in your community? What are the names we see?
Just wondering if we're going to get 99 different names right now.
It'll be fun if we do.
It will be.
So go straight to the chat
Hey,
and
there's
tell.
a one easy one. Middle neighborhoods. Yeah.
Oh, hey, Jim Wheaton, it's so nice to see you. I need to talk to you about condos, Jim Wheaton. Okay. Historic neighborhoods, legacy neighborhoods, workforce housing, middle class or workforce. We've got some middle neighborhoods, a lot of workforce. That's really, really interesting. Transitional neighborhoods, Gina, I can totally see that. Um, okay, I'm loving how many actual middle neighborhoods I see here. You know,
Hmm.
it's one of the things that we love. One of our goals generally is to get to a point where it's people across the country and in all kinds of sectors relevant to us use the words middle neighborhoods and have some common meaning. Neighborhoods of choice. Woo, that's great. That rings some bells from that used to be really um,
Yeah.
a way that oh, anybody who wants to talk about condos can call Jim Wheaton, not just me. Okay, I'll capture that number and call you, Jim. Um, yeah, neighborhoods of choice was a thing that was sort of both a way of describing the existing situation and also an aspirational thing. I associate it with David Belke, who is a great mind in neighborhood place-based change and middle neighborhoods in particular, although we didn't call him then when he was my mentor. Um, Historic neighborhoods, combination of things, Kim says. And Chris says they also have neighborhood initiative areas. Okay. So I guess
Mhm.
one of the things that we definitely want to get the point across is it's okay if not everyone calls them middle neighborhoods. You know, if you have local nomenclature that works to describe this kind of neighborhood, um, then that's great. One of the things that might be useful is to, you know, connect more and more your local networks to the resources we have available. And some of this nomenclature may bleed into, um, you know, your local community. So let's see if I have some action items here. No. Okay. We'll pick up on the thing I just suggested in a minute. So our second theme is that there are real benefits for middle neighborhoods in these cities that have come out of these strong multi-partner local networks. Chief among them is new and larger funding sources. Um, these funding sources, which we'll talk about more later as a separate issue, tend to be non-federal sources of funds. They include sales tax revenue, um, bond issues, proceeds, general revenue from the general budget, casinos, oil leases, all kinds of creative other sources for funds than we're used to seeing in housing. Partly, I think that's because the limitations of HUD pass-throughs make it difficult to accomplish the goals that middle neighborhoods have for themselves, all of them. They can use it for part of their goals, but you really need more flexibility than that. So that's a major benefit we've seen. Policy changes that benefit middles. So more flexibility on things like expanded income limits or geographies that are acceptable. We had a panelist who was a council person in Cleveland from a neighborhood that was really out on the edge of the city's boundaries, and is practically a first-ring suburb. But clearly, if you look at, the data on that neighborhood, the long-term changes, it is a middle neighborhood, and now is the time to intervene when it costs less to either stabilize or change that trajectory than it will if it becomes a more distressed neighborhood. Goals, what is an acceptable goal? That has been very interesting. I noticed multiple times in these interviews that in places that have embraced different funding sources and have really strong local networks, they tend to see housing as an economic development issue, middle neighborhood housing in particular, not just a housing issue. So they'll look at it in terms of, if we don't maintain our middle neighborhoods, our long-term fiscal health of cities is going to be in jeopardy. Through real estate tax revenue, or just the kind of households and school taxes and stuff like that that normally support many of the amenities in cities won't be there. So it is really interesting to me, and I really encourage all of you to start to think more about this, how you can start to think about middle neighborhoods as an economic development issue for your cities or regions. We see a lot of new partners that are attracted to the middle neighborhood uh, topic, who might not have come on board with as strong as they are with middle neighborhoods in more distressed areas, because, for example, with realtors and developers, there's just more for them to do in a middle neighborhood. There are houses to sell. There are small scale development projects to be done. There are all kinds of things, and that brings creative ideas to these partnerships. So fresh problem solving versus what you would normally hear from your standard HUD-funded programs. An example of this, if we have anyone from Danville here, let me know. Raise your hand and Anne will find you. There's a realtor, I think, that made a suggestion to our contact in Danville, Susan McCullough, about having a new loan product that would deal with that, upgrading a sort of tired home before it goes on the market, either a grant or a loan that goes to the seller or to the buyer, so that those updates can be made and those properties don't automatically go to investors because they haven't been updated.
Hey,
So
Marcia. So
yeah.
there was a question in the chat here, just to jump in. Um,
Mhm.
there was a question about the Cleveland neighborhood. Dr. Angela Sales was wondering do you remember which neighborhood it was in Cleveland?
No, but I bet
Cleveland
there are other,
rocks.
pardon? Cleveland Rocks,
Cleveland.
yes.
Yeah, they're
We know
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
It was, as I remembered, it was out on the western edge of the city. If I heard the name, I'd be able to say what it was again.
Okay.
And if we had a map of Cleveland, Cleveland neighborhoods, I could point it out. But
Okay.
the name escapes me right now. Um,
Charles Life.
yes,
Oh,
Charles was the
Brooklyn.
council person from that neighborhood. Yeah. Okay. And just that having more partners together, this was something that came up with NERA, which is the sort of coalition of first ring suburbs around Dallas. They have a group called NERA, and they sort of pool their thoughts and resources so that, for one thing, they can do a really interesting skills development conference for residents of their middle neighborhoods, and they rotate around, I think, to different cities
Mhm.
who takes it on, and they're able to attract more, better resources and speakers and stuff like that that they can all benefit from. Does that sound familiar, Anne?
Yes,
You
yes,
interviewed
it
them.
definitely does. And I got to talk so Marcia and I split up, our conversations, and then we both kind of dug into all the details. But I spoke with Lori Schwartz on this, and it was
Mhm.
really interesting to hear all the things that they're doing with leadership and working together and bringing that those regions together to focus on um, the sharing training, pulling in jurisdictions and the leadership programs, and they even did some legal clinics together. So they did some neat stuff. So I'm going
Yeah.
to try to find their website, but I did just put the acronym in the chat
Yeah,
there.
it's Neighborhood Engagement and Revitalization Alliance. And it was really, I think it was kicked off by Lori, who at the time was the director of neighborhood services in Plano, um, and started, engaging with her other first ring suburb. No, it was kicked off by Garland. Okay.
There it
I've been to
is.
Garland. Garland, Texas is a great city, and continues to do really amazing things. And uh, I think this is like a subcategory of middle neighborhoods is first ring suburbs. And it's extremely interesting to look at them because they are able to approach this without the baggage of, decades usually of past fights over resources and, sort of the long-term calcification of how HUD pass-throughs get distributed and stuff like that. And because they don't get a lot of HUD money, they tend to use general revenue, which is much more flexible. So it's just fascinating to look at what they do. And I encourage everyone to go to the websites for the cities of Garland and Plano and look at their neighborhood services areas and look how they brand programs and make them really interesting and exciting and attractive for residents to get involved in. Okay, so in the chat, another chat. Pretty soon we're going to go to a Padlet. But what benefits do you think you could have if you had a stronger local middle neighborhood network? Any of these things seem like they might be a result of having like some people rowing the same direction across sectors. What benefits do you think you could have? Healthier
And this could
communities for
really
sure.
be different. Hmm.
Yeah, really. Improve collective advocacy. That's a great way to put that, Laura. I appreciate that. That's kind of what gets some of those better resources, right? But it also gets policy changes. You might be able to prevent institutional investors, yeah, by partnering together, establishing more residential and commercial diversity. Mm, I like this, Jesse, a more professionalized community development network. More organizations means more capacity. Um, mm, Interesting, Matthew. Programs that leverage owner sweat equity. I mean, I've certainly seen that. Um, and having a strategic approach to stabilizing middle neighborhoods for sure. Shoring up owner occupancy, that's such a big deal. Middle neighborhoods are really dependent on the next home buyer. I just did a custom presentation that was sort of Middle Neighborhoods 101, but it was for the New Mexico chapter of ULI. So it's much more developer angled. And I talked a lot about how middle neighborhood markets work and what the key points of vulnerability are that are signals that to the market that it's not worth investing there. So that's key. Mm, yes, policy and funding resources in the Midwest cities where construction costs, yeah, they require gap funds. So the whole issue of being able to deal with appraisal gaps, huge. And in the markets where that are not hot markets, that's always a big issue. Um, okay, great. Those are all, I think, great answers. Those are all reflective of things that we have been seeing here. So here are some possible local action items that we came up with. If you don't already have a network, or even if you have the beginnings of one, start to think about who your natural allies are. Who are the people for whom it matters whether middle neighborhoods survive or not? Not just certainly with residents of those neighborhoods, but what about your school district? What about, you know, your long-term city government's fiscal health? What about developers that are looking for solid comps to support the projects that they're doing, but they're losing their comps because values are declining? There's all kinds of natural allies that we could think about, and we're going to give you a chance to do that. And then I usually just start with one-on-one conversations if to sort of surface common priorities, to talk about middle neighborhoods, to find out what their self-interests are around there. And then I can start to pull together in my mind what the themes are. And ultimately, I want to be able to convene all of those people so that they know each other and they start talking about these common themes and can even start to develop some group goals around whatever those common themes are, around policy issues that are important to them, around, supporting practice in nonprofits, about maybe getting research done through a market analysis, and about getting different kinds of funding. And always consider inviting us to do a customized Middle Neighborhoods 101 webinar for your local group whenever you get to that point. We can customize it to your local situation. And as we just did for New Mexico, we can develop a historical map series that shows your middle neighborhoods from 1970 to now and how they've either grown, surprise, they probably haven't, or declined in number over time and how they've moved or where they've exited from and that sort of thing. And it can really spark a lot of interesting conversation. So that's a wonderful resource we have thanks to Chris Hoff at NCST. So Anne is going to put into the chat again a link to the Padlet, and we'd like for you guys to work on the first two columns. And they are who might be your natural allies in creating a stronger local middle neighborhood network. And if you've already got some people, try to think of who might be some others that you haven't approached before. And in the second column, what are some ways that you might ultimately convene those allies to discuss their common areas of concern? So let's see. I think,
Yeah, so Marcia, I'll just say just a couple things about the Padlet. So
yeah,
Padlet is it's a collaborative. If you've never used it, it's kind of a collaborative tool, um, so that we can all put our thoughts and ideas in here. One of the lovely things about Padlet is when we're done, we can create a PDF, we can share it, like we can, keep all of the responses and share that with you. So we're just working on Padlet 1 and Padlet
see?
2. There
Yeah,
you
just
go.
these two. So you click on the plus, it gives you a little frame to write what you need, and then you can publish it. City Council, yes. Every single one of those city council members for sure. Mm,
Yeah. And you can also, click the heart and love it or whatever.
yes,
But yeah, it's nice to
love it.
flesh out and get as many ideas in there as we can. Um, and then this can be our resource that we can share afterwards.
Yeah. Um, ooh, local environmental and social justice groups. That's interesting. Um, green space organizations, yeah, school networks. Just think if your network included parent advocacy groups as well as business leaders and city council people. You're going to start to hit on a lot of different points of common interest and be able to advance your cause. Housing agencies, city and state officials. Yeah, neighborhood associations for sure. One of the places that is a challenge for us in the community practice a little bit is that many middle neighborhoods don't have a nonprofit working in them, but they do have a neighborhood association, but there's not an obvious way for us to access to find out who they are. And that's one of the reasons we try to really reach out to local governments because they do. Let's see what Kim said down here. Community members, code enforcement, yes. CLTs, bids, universities, yeah. Small scale developers for sure. Okay, what do we got over here? Community meetings. So in ways to convene people. Uh, Middle neighborhood citywide government meetings. That's very interesting. Divide the city into 4 or 5 areas and meet monthly or per council district. Yeah. Cleveland has done roundtables more than once, I believe, roundtable events where they convene people and mix them up sector-wise and, have an agenda of topics to talk about. Neighbor cleanups, yeah. This is really good, Laura. So don't assume that the convenings have to be the big hotel ballroom. It's a funny thing to bring up today, but meeting space or, church basement. It could be that you also need to have a variety of convenings that are just talking to people at neighborhood cleanups where they are. I saw that little laughing face. I don't know who it came from. But yeah, we need to convene people at all different scales. Tours. Oh, I love that. That's great. Sharon, I hope I pronounced your name right. So you're from Healthy Neighborhoods in Baltimore. And I know you guys probably do that all the time. Local realtor groups for sure. Um, one of the biggest aha moments of my career around middle neighborhoods was I always like to, when I'm working on working with people to do a strategy in a city or neighborhood, I like to meet with realtors. And I got a meeting with, I got to be on the agenda of a sales meeting for a local broker organization. And I just usually ask them questions about how's the market doing, what houses, kinds of houses are selling, what aren't, and what neighborhoods are selling and which aren't, and why not, and all of that. And somehow we got around to, in that city, the topic of the one bathroom home. And they just very matter of factly said, oh yeah, well, we just promote those to investors. And I was like, what? I mean, I never really quite grasped how intensely that was the case, that they sort properties to who's going to buy them. And that launched a whole bunch of ideas and various programs around adding half baths to houses. Okay. Ooh, a design charrette in Cole. We're really only answering these, but we don't mind too much if you get ahead of us. A traveling circus to go to different neighborhoods. You are a very creative person. Yes, it's Manny. No wonder. Design charrettes, excellent. Leverage schools as neighborhood hubs. I just love that. Um, okay, nice. All right, so I am going to go back to our Padlet, or excuse me, to our slide deck. So I don't have the Padlet on my screen anymore, right?
Nope.
Okay, good. Our third theme, really big one. Market trends and just routine market analyses often drew attention to middle neighborhoods in these communities. So this happened in a couple of ways. So on the market trends side of it, I would say up until this sudden market trend happened, or this routine market analysis surfaced issues, people probably thought that middle neighborhoods were on autopilot and were doing fine and really didn't need any attention. And then things happened like catastrophic downward economic trends really shook people's complacency about that. So, the collapse of an industry in town, the foreclosure crisis in many places, it made people realize that it wasn't just their very distressed neighborhoods that were in trouble, it was their middle neighborhoods as well. And it just became really obvious. A high profile crime in some cases. This was the case in Chicago for the set of neighborhoods that is escaping me now, the Greater Chatham set of neighborhoods on the south side. It was a pretty solid Black middle class set of neighborhoods. And then there was a shooting, and it really shook people up. This is not the first time I've heard this before. And I think a wealthy individual came forward to start to organize, a fund to start a nonprofit to really take a look at these neighborhoods and their trends and start to turn things around. Um, in stronger markets, it could be that the complacency was challenged by soaring house prices or just investor growth, that was raising alarms when people were realizing that nobody could buy a home because investors had cash offers and were outbidding them. That really made people start to look at their middle neighborhoods as vulnerable to gentrification and disappearing that way. And then sometimes it was just something routine, a routine market analysis that was part of evaluating a program, say in Des Moines. That's how I think of what the originating thing was that ultimately ended up being an amazing new organization with substantial funding that's focused on middle neighborhoods. They were just evaluating the impact of their existing city programs on neighborhoods. And they started to see that their middle neighborhoods were suffering, their middle class was leaving the city, et cetera. And it just launched a whole additional set of questions, research, strategizing, and so forth to address that. So we're going to go back to that Padlet, and I'd really like to hear from you about what are some market trends in your community that you think might be reasons for local leaders to prioritize middle neighborhoods in strategy, policy, and funding. And I don't mean prioritize them over something else, but to actually start to realize that they're not necessarily going to survive if without some attention and some intervention. So let's go back to that. Padlet. See if there we go. So we are on column 3 now. So increased city demolitions. Ooh, that's a rough one. Yeah, that could lead to or maybe this is a condition, an increase in buy and hold real estate strategies. That might mean, you can tell us more about that if you like, but it might mean that people are buying homes and just sitting on them, not renting them or selling them or improving them, et cetera. Lost population, big one. Days on market, if people are paying attention to the home sales market, you can definitely tend to see when things are slowing down. Yeah, who's buying homes and how many of those are large corporate investors? I worked on a project in Indianapolis where we just wanted to know what the investor profile was in a Black middle neighborhood. And their strategy that they were planning to do was act rehab resale, and they were having trouble acquiring properties. And when we actually looked at who owned what property and sort of grouped them, it turned out that 24% of their single family housing stock was owned by out-of-state investors already. And that didn't even count the homes that were owned by local or state investors. So it was really a much bigger problem than they realized. Yes, ownership by LLCs, exactly. Increased crime, days on market. Uh-huh. An aging population, big one. Okay. So theme four, or oh, let's talk about the action items. Um, again, we talked about surfacing existing concerns a little bit. So this, I think, if you don't have a market analysis that sort of, really looks at data over historical data about the trends in middle neighborhoods, I encourage you to work towards one. And one way to do that is to start to just interview your allies about their perceptions of changes, and pulling together those themes and convening them to think about what are the biggest research questions they have. What would they like answered given their concerns? And that can start to be the outline for an RFP to get a market analysis done. So, helping people understand the big picture. Once you get a market analysis document in hand, that can be a tool that can launch many discussions, many can be points that are referenced in many arguments for um, funding priorities and all kinds of things. There's a really, I'm sorry, I'm having a little interference on my end. It can be really an important tool. So you might want to meet with your city or county planning agency to find out if there is an existing market analysis already. Take a look at that and see whether anything in there, provides some talking points or a jumping off point for additional questions about middle neighborhoods. Look for those connections and then draw them out in conversations with other stakeholders. And then you might want to advocate for, or yourself, if you're in a position to commission, an update to that market analysis to focus in on some of those questions that you all have about where your middle neighborhoods are going.
Hey,
And
Marcia, for me, your audio kind of went down just a little bit.
okay, I'll turn myself up. It's
There you
probably
go.
some interference from landscapers.
Oh,
I think they'll be done in a minute. I'm sort of angling myself away from them.
yeah.
So, I really do. Uh, uh, I think, and I'd love to know what you think in the chat. Like, do you have a market analysis that reports on trends in middle neighborhood housing markets? Or, maybe it wasn't commissioned exactly or exclusively to do that, but it still does address that. I'm just amazed by how effective a tool a market analysis can be in sparking conversations and moving a policy and research agenda forward. So in the chat, do you have a market analysis? Okay. And say more than yes or no. Let's see, let me ask a better question. Um, if you have one, has it been useful to advancing conversations or a policy agenda or something? Oh, okay. April says all of theirs are focused on downtown.
Yeah, it might be helpful to know, maybe it might be helpful to know who's doing it too. Like how are you
Yeah.
who
Who
yeah, if you have one, how did you get it done?
who funded the market analysis in the first place? So we have some no's, we have some yeses. Um, is there anyone here who's been able to use a market analysis? I'd love for you to let's unmute you and have you talk about it. Use, some of the findings in a market analysis to sort of advance an agenda of connecting people or getting some policy action or something like that. Does anybody have a situation like that? If you do, identify yourself in the chat. Oh, Linda, okay, or excuse me, Laura. Um,
Better.
can you unmute Laura?
Yep. I gotta, there we go.
In Jackson, Michigan, we've done what's called a 100 homes program. The municipality's done a really good job with it. So they're building on vacant lots, brand new housing, they've increased the down payment to up to $50,000 down. The building,
Ooh.
$178,000, or the house is built for $178,000. So they get up to $50,000 down from 80 to 120% area median income. And how I've used that is, since they're building these new homes in neighborhoods that are of lesser value, it's a great way of showing value to a new person buying in the neighborhood, that the neighborhood will increase in value simply as a result of these new homes that are being built.
Yeah, that's good. One of the strategies that is often needed in a middle neighborhood is sort of building housing values up so that it starts to make economic sense for people to make the updates and improvements, and they're not going to have an appraisal gap. Um, so Jim, I wonder, I'd be really interested to hear how you merge this idea of missing middle housing into a place-based middle neighborhoods stabilization strategy, because I'm sure that you do in Chicago. Can you unmute yourself and talk about that?
You might have to raise his hand and then
It's Jim Wheaton.
there you are, Jim. It brings him up to the top. So when you raise your hand, it'll float to the top and then I can unmute you quickly. There we go. And then he's just got to unmute. There we
Okay.
I may
go.
have
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. So, want to restate the question a little bit more? So, I mean, we have this missing middle strategy, and we have, 17,000 vacant lots around the city, some of which are in what you would call middle neighborhoods because of whatever has happened over the years. Somebody dies, there's no heirs, the building becomes vacant, abandoned, gets torn down, whatever. So, I think that it's kind of a mix of strategies. So we've got this vacant land, which is, being sold to developers for $1 a lot, and they're building new single family homes and two flats. Now, the city is not necessarily providing them any financing to do that. So these are developers who have to be able to, do this on their own. And, um, you know, construction costs in Chicago are much more than $178,000 for a single family home. I mean, let's say add $200,000 to that. Part of it is due to the fact that there's the imposition of prevailing wage requirements, the cumbersome permitting process and the length of time it takes, et cetera, et cetera. So all those add to costs. So there is that. We also have our Chicago Neighborhood Rebuild Project, where we're literally acquiring vacant homes, not always in middle neighborhoods, but adjacent to middle neighborhoods, and turning those over to developers to rehab and sell to new owner occupants. And then we're right sizing those deals at the back end, to make sure that the sales price and the total development costs are in line with one another. So, we're giving up to $350,000 in subsidy for those projects to either the acquisition of the property or the right sizing at the back end. And then we have something called and I don't know the acronym because I don't deal so much with the home ownership, single family stuff anymore. I'm more on the project base, but building affordable neighborhoods together or something like that. Anyway, that's grant money to new home buyers, either purchasing newly constructed homes or possibly rehabbed homes, and they can get up to $70,000 in assistance. So there are limits to where that's available, and it's not always the most distressed neighborhoods. It's often the neighborhoods where we need to build the market. And that's what our neighborhood rebuild program is about. It's not to just go in and be kind of a salvage operation, but it's really to create a market and build a market. So we're clustering our acquisitions in, within a couple of blocks or even on the same block to create some impact. Um, so I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, we have, different programs. I'm not always the one who's dealing with that single family stuff. I want to hear, what's going on. But right now I'm kind of the king of the island of lost toys. Projects that nobody else wants tend to end up on my desk.
For it. Well, I think that's really interesting what you just said about, you're not your goal is not just to create units wherever they may fall. You're about rebuilding markets so that the normal market can take over and come back to where it used to be, or the normal market can start to maintain the housing supply and continue to turn it over to new buyers. And that is a real distinction, I think, between something that's strictly an affordable housing program and something that does affordable housing, but it's doing it with another outcome in mind. So that's really interesting.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we describe some of the things we do as affordable housing because it is really, more like you said, building a market. I like to say, and that I've used this for years in my nonprofit experience and now with the city, is that the individual is the customer, but the neighborhood is the client.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that. Yeah. It's another David Belkeyism in my mind from way back. So that's really
Yep.
interesting for this client.
Been a long time since I heard that name.
You're right. We're all sharing our age group. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's a lesson for everybody about how if there is a missing middle housing program that in your city, there are ways to engage yourself with it to ensure that it does the most for middle neighborhoods. You know what I mean? So it's tweaked in the way that it's implemented so that it accomplishes goals for middle neighborhood stabilization. Um,
So we have
let's see.
another hand up of Casey.
Good.
I'm
Casey,
there you go.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
yes.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Good afternoon, everyone. So in Cleveland, as you may or may not have heard, we are launching one of the largest middle neighborhood investments across the country. Also, across the globe, I'll say. Why not? Let's have some fun with this. So similar to our colleague in Chicago, although different, Cleveland's markets are substantially, our middle neighborhoods for the most part are lagging behind, pushing below that. So we're playing some catch up. But what our program is a direct interface against investor activity. So our bread and butter is to seek out the LLC ones that are for sale and to buy them with cash. So our public partners, City of Cleveland, State of Ohio, and some philanthropy groups basically front loaded us. So we're able to compete. I'm also a licensed agent. I can tell you firsthand, seeing this, that it changes the game and enables us to get back into the houses in terms of acquisition. But there's a cost to that. So, typically it costs us about on the east side of Cleveland, 100, grand-ish to get in the door to acquire something. On the west side, that number doubles, but also your sales in that affect your gap is lower on the west side because you can sell that at a higher price point. So the challenge really still comes down to construction costs. And I can't remember, our to build a new house in Cleveland's definitely, you can't do it for less than 275, period, unless you want to start cutting corners and making it look terrible, in which the planners and all the approval processes don't like regardless. Similar challenge in middle neighborhoods when we take existing stock, and for the most part, Cleveland stock is in excess of 100 years old in our neighborhoods. For the most part, we're still dealing with significant disinvestment, and I'll call it, bad DIY jobs, which takes a lot of resources to correct. And then the problem with our public partners in philanthropy is that I can't cheat. So I have to follow every city code and process and permit where a normal rehabber can find a way around that and they can cut costs. So that is, again, when you look at our total development costs, there really is no way to circumvent it. So as you may have seen in my chats, I am a large proponent of saying additional state and federal resources could be necessary in many Midwest markets, because I know from many of you that are on this call, our markets just don't make sense when you have to play by those rules and to do that the right way, and you still have to sell it at a sales gap. And Marcia, I will push back to say we're not having appraisal problems. We know that if I got to put, whatever, I'll make up a number, 350 into a house, buying it, renovating it, and getting on the market, if the market only holds 300, I'm having no problems getting them appraised at 300, given the scope of work. And I think that speaks to the lack of supply, but maybe that's a Northeast Ohio issue. But I will say that from a tax-based source, that's an absolute advocacy point that we utilize as well to advocate for those dollars to say, I'm putting properties back on the rolls. My properties, for the most part, are not tax abated either. And I'm raising those ships, so to speak, within those neighborhoods. And the resident impact is so awesome because they're so happy to see that investment work and knowing that there's value in their own personal investments in those neighborhoods. And I missed that quote before. I'm sorry. I was trying to figure out my phone app, but it was very similar to saying that, that our customers are the residents, and you have to signal that market strength. And that's definitely one of our iterations, and our goal is to signal to the markets that your property has value, please invest in it. Or if you're going to buy here, yes, you can make some money here if you do it the right way. But I also will say I can't, leave this part of my combo or my spiel here without mentioning my colleague, Michael Elliott, who handles our commercial work. We're definitely trying to approach this both from chicken and egg, is that we know that we need assets and amenities. So when we attract buyers who are literally making double the AMIs of some of these neighborhoods we're working within, they want to go have the ability to have a coffee shop, a breakfast spot, whatever that is. And my colleague runs a white boxing program, which is very similar to our housing challenges. We have owners that do not have the financial ability to renovate, or they're just smart enough not to put the money in, knowing that they're not going to find a tenant to pay X in rent. So it's still very much similar to a gap model, but tremendous success in occupying commercial spaces, as well as in concert with our residential work. So if anybody wants to come to Cleveland, we're always willing to host and help out and have any follow-ups on that. But I just wanted to throw that out there to the group.
I love that white boxing strategy. So it's, taking funky commercial spaces and just basically doing the work to get them down to a place that's a white box ready to be customized to whoever the next tenant is. This is a very much needed thing. When I work in middle neighborhood business districts, I so often find that there are people who own commercial districts properties, and they've been using that property for storage forever. It doesn't meet code. They don't want to bother with it. And they're just happy to just let it sit there. So we really have to do some stuff to shake some of these commercial properties loose, I think. But yeah, so this is really interesting. So this conversation sort of took a turn, I think, toward um, not just the market analysis as a tool for sort of understanding whether and when and where your middle neighborhoods are disappearing, but really understanding some market-based strategies that would, you know, correct, I guess, the disincentives for investing in them again, because that's really what it comes down to. We're ending up with places that have a bunch of disincentives to invest in them, and we need to correct those. Okay. Let's see. So our theme for strong local government support and non-federal funding sources are key factors in the highest capacity networks. So I've alluded to this before, but in most of our strongest local middle neighborhood networks, they have strong advocates either with the mayor or the city manager and council leadership. And that makes a big difference in policy and funding priorities for middle neighborhoods. Concurrent with that, there seems to be this attitude of investing in middle neighborhoods as an economic development strategy for the city. And it is the point of leadership where it's possible to be talking about creating non-federal resources. So these are places where, famously, we talk about it all the time in Des Moines. That city manager was on board from the beginning and really took the leadership in securing funding from a sales tax initiative that funds that organization. Invest DSM is something like $15 million a year. And we've just heard, by the way, that they're about 5 or 6 years old now, and they've been so successful that a large family foundation has decided to match that $15 million a year. So they're going to be working with, I don't know, $25, $30 million a year in funds that have no restrictions on them in terms of the usual federal restrictions. So in Padlet for column 4, let's think about how practitioners in middle neighborhoods could get more support from their mayor, their city manager, or their council. Like, how could you get in front of them? How could you get them to care about this and to be your advocate?
Do you want to jump over to the Padlet?
Yeah, I was looking for that link again.
Oh, I'll
I
put it
keep
back
reopening it.
Nope, that's okay. Let me see. Whoops, that's the wrong one.
Okay, we're in column 4 here.
Yep.
So just communicating and promoting the work that's going on. But it'll be important to find a channel where that message actually gets delivered to them, and that the message is something that's crafted to appeal to them, to whatever it is they care about. I have to turn some noise off on my phone. Neighborhood tours in other districts. Yeah, get them out in the neighborhood. Ride-alongs. I love ride-alongs. Oh, local university film students. Let's see, where is this person from? I don't know AMC, who you are or where you are. I believe it was the city of Chattanooga, not necessarily the city per se, but some entity in Chattanooga for a few years did a neighborhood video contest, and it was astonishing. Some of the neighborhood, they were videos
Yeah,
neighborhood to other potential home buyers, but they were amazing.
I
Coordinated
think we
neighborhood.
wrote that up.
I think we did. I think you wrote it up as a winning strategy, maybe.
I think so. I'm gonna go look.
Another life. Yes, participate on local boards and task forces. So understand what their favorite projects are now and get involved in them so you can, have that kind of view of what they care about and why they care about it. That's going to help you craft your messages. Form a council of middle neighborhood civic associations. Love that. Compliment them publicly. Yeah, Laura, that's right. Yeah, frame neighborhood initiatives as solutions to broader challenges. I think that's totally right. Frame it not just as we're a neighborhood that deserves investment to, if we project tax revenue into the next 50 years from middle neighborhoods, it's declining and you need to do something about it. Yeah, so, and then we have, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so a little bit more complicated data analysis technique here. Okay. Um, yeah, there are just so many ways, and we can totally help you one-on-one to sort of sort them out too. One of the things that I think that's comment was alluding to is we can do a map series for you that can be a tool to convene people, to share with somebody in city government who cares about this stuff, pull together a conference call to react to it, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of things you can do. Okay. So I think that we also have a couple of ideas here. Get in front of them, start to recraft your message if you haven't already to why investing in middle neighborhoods is an economic development opportunity. Document the loss of middle neighborhoods either through, you know, um, further distress or through gentrification and how that impacts housing values and tax revenues. And start to share commitments by other mayors and city managers across the country and how they're making commitments to middle neighborhoods and what their economic development rationale is, so that they can, understand it from a full perspective. Okay, so our theme 5. Can you guys hear dogs barking?
A little bit. We hear mostly you.
Not too bad. All right.
No, it's not bad.
These are my usually silent dogs. They're egging each other on. Um, we noticed that a lot of when there is a local place-based initiative that, was started by a foundation or a mayor's office or something like that, when they have gone through the process of deciding which neighborhoods they're going to focus on for their place-based initiative, they often choose middle neighborhoods. And I think the reason they get there is that they're looking for places where limited resources can actually make a difference in a meaningful time frame. And these are logical places to work. And that has been sort of a way that there's been a group of middle neighborhoods that have some funding that can then come together and advocate for other policy and program and funding initiatives. So, for example, in Detroit, the Mayor's Strategic Neighborhood Fund was one of those. In Chattanooga, there have been various foundation initiatives over the years that I've observed and been involved in. In Des Moines, they call them strategic investment districts. And in Syracuse, they're about to do a whole thing with asset clusters. So it's clusters of blocks around assets that they're going to fund with general revenue. So I think Anne has a poll for us. Is there currently a place-based multi-neighborhood revitalization initiative at work in your community? Yes or no? And if so, what's it called?
Oh, my.
Oh,
Are you guys seeing where you can answer I have it set as long answer, but
yeah, it just says how many people answered. It doesn't say what they're answering.
okay, as long as you guys are seeing it, we don't see it on our end, so that's okay. All right, let's try to get 100% participation.
Yeah. It's a yes or no question. It's easy. And then Anne
Almost there.
is done. Maybe if you post results, I don't know. Maybe
Yeah, I'll see. I guess usually when I do polls, it's either one or the other. I don't normally have one that's yes, no, and then the other that's short answer. So I'm excited to see what happens when I end the poll. Not sure what we'll see from this end, but if I can share it, I will.
Okay.
So we can keep that up for a minute.
Okay. We'll set that
If you want.
aside.
It looks like we're maybe about half of the people so people might still be in there.
So, some local action items. If you have a local place-based initiative that includes some middle neighborhoods, start to share the resources that we offer with the stakeholders. So, get them tuned into our webinars. let them know that we can do a custom webinar. Um, you know, just try and do whatever you can to get them on our mailing list, and get them more hooked into the national network. If there are unconnected place-based initiatives in your community, which happens all the time, different nonprofits are in charge of different neighborhoods, try convening those that are working in middle neighborhoods and do a roundtable, or have us do a webinar for them. So I guess we're not going to see, is that still the poll is open or?
Yeah, I just closed it and shared it, and it looks like I have to like log in and get the results. So
Maybe you can show us the
I'll see
results.
if I can, yeah, I'll see if I can do that another way. But it looks like
Okay.
63% said yes, that
Okay.
they already have one currently in place.
So regular convening of partners in these places provides opportunities. This won't go away. To identify and advance middle neighborhood priorities. This makes sense, right? If if you have an infrastructure in place where for some reason, some reasonable facsimile of middle neighborhood stakeholders are already meeting, it's a great way to start to introduce some of the resources that we have, or to perhaps take on some of the webinar topics we do at the national level, but pull together your own local panel, and have that be one of your meetings. Um, we've done that with a group in Detroit. They have a regular group that meets, and so we did a custom webinar for them, and they have people who are interested in replicating some of our national topics at the local level there. And if you don't have a network already, or an infrastructure like that, you can be one single determined person like Susan McCullough in Danville, who really sees it as part of her job to have one-on-one meetings all the time with stakeholders in different sectors and collect their ideas and share them to each other. And she ultimately pulls together a conference every year that convenes everybody to talk about this stuff. Her conference this year is specifically themed on middle neighborhoods. Um, so that's a thing that we observe and that you can do. Identify and join existing networks if they do exist, introduce some middle neighborhood topics, meet one-on-one if you don't, and start to build that. Theme 7 in our interviews is that our webinars at the Community of Practice and our other resources were trusted and valuable resources. So that, of course, made us feel good, but it also makes us believe that to the extent that we can get more people accessing them, the more likely we are to strengthen your local networks and then ultimately strengthen the national network. So to the extent that you can, think about who those people are, start to build your regular list and make sure that they know when topics that are relevant to your community come up. But theme 8, oh, let's see, do we really have time to do this? It's 10:15. I think I would love for you to do this though. What other resources from the community of practice at a national level would be helpful to you in strengthening your local network? What aren't we doing besides giving you money that would be helpful? Other resources. We can leave that up. We don't have to. More collaborations. That's interesting. Um, Sheila, can you unmute? It's Sheila Johnson. Raise your hand, Sheila, so Ann can find you and give us some idea of what you mean by more collaborations.
If I can find her.
Sheila E.
Usually by the time I scroll down, they're up at the top of the list. Let's see. Sheila, here she is.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Woo woo. Hi, greetings from Philly. Greetings from Philadelphia. Um, I'm saying more collaborations because there are so many small groups that need that initial push and they don't know. So someone just said resources. Yes, resources, because we need to pull together, especially when there are um, small groups that need this, sensational help. We have a lot of empty properties and empty spaces here in Philly. And there, as someone said earlier, yes, there are places that people have died and left them unwilled and whatever have you. But we definitely need to collaborate with different groups because a lot of times with the people that I've connected with, like Philly Hub and some other groups, we're trying to do that now and have a solid collaboration in different sectors of our city because that's like I said in the chat, Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods. And we have several. We have South Philly, Northwest, the Northeast, and they're all areas of eclecticness, which lots of different nationalities. And, so it would be great to have a solid and firm collaboration so we can reach everyone because
Yeah.
sometimes affordable housing is not affordable housing. I'm just going to leave it like that for you guys.
That's true. Unfortunately, you do have a mayor who actually calls herself the middle neighborhood's mayor
Love her.
sometimes.
Love her. She's
Yeah,
amazing.
I love her too. And she's working, tirelessly on pulling together resources. It's not been an easy haul. Um, and there are a lot of different touch points, but I wonder about, the extent to which there's anybody's pulling together anything for middle neighborhood, neighborhood associations and so forth in terms of an event that you can all start to find your common interests and common concerns and start to share with each other. That could be really exciting. I'm going to mention this too and bring it up with, we have somebody, Rachel Meadows, who's on our steering committee. Oh, yeah, she's on board. Yeah, she is. Um, so Dr. Sale says they're on the east side of Cleveland. It was not, yeah, aware of the middle neighborhoods connection on the west side. Yeah, what neighborhood are you in or what city or community, Dr. Sales? I'd be curious because we have a lot of contacts there. And you should be connected with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress because they are the ones who, even though they're working strictly with Cleveland proper, I imagine they absolutely are a hub for all middle neighborhood resources in the broader area, I would say. Okay, theme 8 is a gap area for us. Um, in our conversations, people raised the fact that we don't really have a presence at the state level. In Ohio, Cleveland has managed to raise some significant money at the state level, and it certainly there are resources, grant funding, loan funds, loan products, all kinds of things that can happen at the state level that could be really helpful. And so we're recognizing that as a gap in our support to you and trying to figure out how we can do more at the state level. We'd be interested in the Padlet if you could talk about how we could do a better job of raising awareness at state level to support you. Certainly, the ideas we've had from the people we talked with are, to circulate if you ask for it. Whoops, we're going backwards there. If you would like a list of members in our community of practice for your state, then we could provide that. And then you could sort of grasp where the where the other people are in your state and start to pull something together at the state level. You could propose sessions on middle neighborhoods at relevant state conferences, and we could support you in that with helping you develop your presentation and that sort of thing. And then watch for any national conferences that are being held in your state and try for a session there, and we'd be happy to partner with you on that. For instance, the National Vacant Properties Conference is going to be held in Pittsburgh this year. And we're always trying for sessions and usually get one at the RVP conferences, but we have had sessions at APA conferences as well. So definitely reach out to us in any way that we can help support you there. Okay, those are our 8. So in the chat, I wonder if, again, you have any ideas for other areas beyond those 8 that you think we ought to be assisting you with at the national level. And while you're thinking about that in the chat, let's all go take a look at the Padlet too. And I'd love to hear about what you think might be some doable next steps for you at the local level to strengthen your network. I'm going over to the Padlet now.
So Marcia, just so you know, because there were some other kind of topics that weren't fitting into categories, I just added a couple there. So the Padlet, the last Padlet is way over. I just added it. So we were on the far right.
Here we go. Okay, so yeah, we have some other ideas and other topics. Okay. Here's the state
Keep going.
level.
There should be the 6th. The doable next step should be there.
There it is. Okay. So here's our doable next steps over at the end. What do you think you might do? What is anything that we talked about today that could be something you could do a little bit more on in your local situation? Laura, I love all of your comments. They're so great. I am a marketing person at my core. So marketing and branding, I used to do a lot of technical assistance and training on place branding for neighborhoods. Encourage state or local incentives for home repairs. Yeah. You know, one of the pieces of legislation that continues to float around is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, which the shorthand for that is that it would be like similar to the low-income housing tax credit, except it would fund homeownership. You know, specifically appraisal gaps to get this housing stock updated and back into the homes of homeowners. Summarize the development impact of missing middle housing. Yeah, that's a to-do thing that we can do. So I don't see any doable next steps here. Does that mean nobody's going to do anything? Give that some thought. We're going to leave this Padlet open for a while before Anne closes it and downloads it and sends it out to everyone. And so you could think about it as not just for me, but for everybody else who gets this. What are some doable next steps that you either have taken or get the right people elected? Boy, is that the case. You know, that you think would be helpful to others as an ideal place to start. Okay. We're going to wrap this up because we have a couple of other things to share with you. We haven't done this before, but because of the nature of this webinar, we want to hold office hours for you to ask specific questions about your situation, make requests to us for support, hear ideas from everybody else, etc. So the first one we're going to do is on Thursday, May 14th. We are going to ask you to register so that we know how many people are coming and can actually organize it into something that'll be super useful for you guys. We're going to try it for an hour. And if it turns out to be useful and anybody does it, then we may start repeating these every month. And you can scan for that registration. We'll also be sending out, you know, a promo about it so that you know more about it. We have upcoming webinars that we're really excited about. one of the things we're about to launch is a 4-part series that we're calling Understanding the Big Picture. And it's going to be with Alan Malik, who is an international thought leader. He's written 23 books, not all of them about urban planning and community development, but most of them. And he's a person that all different scales of our sector goes to really think about the big picture and put in context our local situations. So we're going to co-sponsor this with Center for Community Progress because he first developed these webinars for their staff internally, and then they generously are allowing him to present them to all of you. So on May 12th, we have demographic change, what it means for our cities and neighborhoods. June 9th, housing deterioration and home repair, why America fails to maintain its housing stock. July 7th, vacancy and reuse of commercial properties. And on August 4th, we're going to delve into the housing affordability crisis and really challenge some of the prevailing wisdom about, the strategies that are getting a lot of attention and the really big elephant in the room that we're not paying attention to. Also in development, we're working on a middle neighborhoods for planners that will be available for continuing education credit if you are an AICP member, and also on mapping the trends of middle neighborhoods in your community. So you can see some examples of these map series we keep talking about and learn how other people have used them. So we'll be sending out promos for all of these. Also, if you want to think a little bit further out, we have some professional development opportunities at the NeighborWorks Training Institute. I'm going to be teaching my 2-day course on CCD in places, high impact strategy development. It's very small area planning, place-based, market-oriented, kind of how to look at a place, look at conditions spatially, think about market trends, and how to craft strategies that are really going to deliver on your long-term place-based outcomes. And then Anne helped develop this course. You're not teaching it, right, Anne?
I am not teaching, no.
But she's so smart that she creates courses for other people to teach, as well as teaching her own. So this one is a new course that's it's sort of designed, I would guess, for housing counselors and homebuyer educators in its original, impetus, but it's about property inheritance and estate planning strategies. So how can you start to incorporate this kind of estate planning stuff up front in home buyer education and counseling so that you don't wind up with an heir's property that has a title that's in limbo later. Okay. Yeah. So follow us at LinkedIn. We need you. We hardly have anybody there. And also, always email us. It hasn't been a real priority for us, but we'd really love to see more people there. We do communicate that way. And always pay attention to the Cornerstone webinar series, and you'll get an evaluation from us shortly about this, where you can add ideas for future webinars. And by attending this webinar, you have become a member of our community of practice. That entitles you to learn about our webinars in advance, call us anytime for being connected to peers in other places and other kinds of support. We're really excited to have you with us. So thanks everyone for your time and attention. And we'll be sending out some follow-up stuff, including the link to this webinar.
I'm going to make sure I share the